One game that I always like to go back to is Counter-Strike Source. Now, Counter-Strike as a whole has always had a few things about it that I've hated and referred to as actively anti-fun. So why do I keep going back to it? Despite its occasional anti-fun mechanics, like the long wait to respawn after dying, the way you have to stand totally still to shoot accurately, and how often it degenerates into hide and seek with guns, it remains a holdout of the old gaming culture. Something from the decentralized, deregulated days of multiplayer gaming, where serious competitive gaming took a backseat to chilling online and having fun. Back in these days, if you found yourself getting banned from one server for saying something too spicy, you just found another server that allowed such behavior. This decentralized way of letting communities make their own rules led to a much more organic and fun gaming experience. Most of the game was driven by community servers, often on custom-made maps, and it was common to have a server with one or two people who seemed to be on every single day and know every other player. These were often teenage boys who mumbled into the microphone, spoke in short, meme-laden sentences talking like this, and took absolutely nothing seriously. Kids who, despite being able to snipe you from across the map, never really seemed like they were trying too hard. Seemingly indifferent to their own kill-death ratio, and offended by nothing, these pillars of the community held together their own small and unassuming corners of the internet. When I play a game of Counter-Strike Source, I don't feel the weight of the modern internet, where a bunch of human speed bumps have decided that we need accountability and consequences for everything. I can spray goatsy everywhere if I want. I can play a vuvuzela into the microphone in between talking about having sex with everyone else's moms, and if people don't like it, they can either use the mute button or talk shit back. The worst thing that can happen is that a community's moderators can ban me, but even this is rare. If it does happen, I just go and find a community that's more relaxed. For the best years of online gaming, this was the approach taken. The modern compulsion to punish people for being mean or obnoxious in an online game was limited to noobs who quickly either got over themselves or washed out. And you know what? Gaming, and indeed the internet as a whole, was at least as good, if not better, without the modern obsession with holding people accountable. This unhealthy fixation with creating authoritarian spaces online was driven by a shift from creating products with the end users in mind to creating products with the advertisers in mind. If you're old like me, you remember being online in the late 2000s into the early 2010s, when social media and online gaming had both broken into the mainstream, but the rules were incredibly lax. This created an online experience that was organic and free-flowing rather than curated and sterile. Cringy new age euphemisms like unalived and graped were unheard of, and no one had to worry about being suppressed or banned by an algorithm. Users were much more able to be themselves because the platforms were designed for them. Somewhere around 2016, advertisers started getting uppity and seeing what they could get away with in terms of making online spaces revolve around them. It started with social media, with either Facebook or Twitter being the first to fall. Community guidelines and terms of service became longer and more prevalent, with more and more things being considered taboo. The increasingly delicate sensibilities of my generation, thanks to BuzzFeed brain rot, were exploited in order to convince us that these rules, which we had been fine without for at least a decade by this point, were for our own good. The YouTube adpocalypse in the mid-2010s made it increasingly obvious that pressure from advertisers was the true motive for such crackdowns. Many people used online games as a refuge to blow off steam, because by this point gaming was still largely free from this top-down smothering approach to things. I'm not sure when this load of unhealthy hang-ups and inhibitions was pushed onto gamers, but I blame Blizzard for it. Mainly because the first game to ever ban me for trash talk was Overwatch, but also because they're now notorious for their authoritarian approach for regulating in-game behavior. How ironic that a company that serves as a haven for sex pests in private is so prudish in public. What caused online games to go soft the way that social media did if they don't primarily rely on advertising dollars? It was likely pressure from shareholders. Once a company goes public, it becomes vulnerable to the delicate and fickle sensibilities of highly speculative and nervous shareholders. This causes their behavior to change based on made-up stock market numbers going up or down, and puts them in a position where they have to create the illusion of perpetual growth, a thing that is impossible to actually have. This kind of pressure is also a major factor in the gaming industry's shift toward microtransaction-riddled live service slop, rather than simply selling complete and enjoyable games. It's why one of the first things you tend to see upon booting up a modern AAA title is a store page, or some kind of advertisement designed to funnel you toward their store page. In short, the internet was better off before the age of strict community guidelines, and the only people who don't want you to realize that are profit-driven assholes who are bogging down games and social media with other cumbersome and anti-consumer features. In case you mistake this for some conservative old man rant, yes, I know that this is due to capitalism kicking into overdrive, and I know that destroying or at least weakening capitalism would bring a sense of culture back to not just online spaces, but real-life spaces as well. We live in a world made of fool's gold, and the people trying to hyper-monetize everything have made it too obvious. All of the organic culture in real-life America was chopped up and sold back to us long before the tendrils of advertiser-friendly forced harmony reached online spaces. If you're here to tell stories of being cyberbullied and express your gratitude that people no longer have the freedom to say mean things to you online, I suggest learning how to use a block button and going outside, rather than openly inviting more cyberbullying in my comments section.